Have you ever wondered how a single moment can unravel decades of buried secrets? What if I told you that a broken down car on a dusty road would expose one of the most sinister conspiracies in American history? Stay with me, because what starts as a simple act of kindness is about to turn into something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The brutal summer heat made the Georgia backroads shimmer like water as 12-year-old Zara Williams trudged home from school. Her sneakers kicked up small clouds of red dust with each step, and sweat trickled down her dark skin despite the shade from the towering oak trees lining the road. She was tired, hungry, and ready to get home to her grandmother's kitchen where the smell of cornbread always greeted her. But then she saw it. A sleek silver Mustang GT sat on the shoulder of the road, hood popped open, steam rising from the engine like smoke signals. A tall, white man in an expensive navy suit paced back and forth beside the car, his phone pressed against his ear, his face twisted in frustration. "I don't care what it costs," the man shouted into his phone. "I've been stranded on this godforsaken road for over an hour. I have a meeting with the senator in—" he glanced at his platinum watch. "Less than 2 hours. Find me a tow truck, now." Zara slowed her pace, watching the scene with cautious curiosity. Her grandmother, Ruth, had always warned her about talking to strangers, especially wealthy-looking ones who had no business being in their small, predominantly black community 2 hours south of Atlanta. But something about the man's desperation made her feet stop moving. She adjusted the weight of her faded backpack, feeling the reassuring presence of the small toolkit her grandfather Samuel had given her before he passed. He'd been a mechanic his whole life, and he'd insisted that everyone should know the basics about engines, especially girls, because the world tried to tell them they couldn't. "Excuse me, mister," Zara called out, taking a few careful steps closer. "You need some help with your car?" The man spun around, his irritated expression quickly morphing into something close to amusement mixed with condescension when he saw the small figure before him. She wore jean shorts with patches on the knees, an oversized Stanford University t-shirt that clearly wasn't hers, and her thick braids were pulled back with a bright yellow scrunchie. To him, she looked like she belonged in a playground, not under the hood of a $60,000 vehicle. "That's sweet of you, honey," he said with a patronizing smile, "but this is a high-performance machine. I need a real mechanic, not a kid." Zara shrugged, stepping closer anyway. "My grandpa owned the garage in town for 30 years. He taught me about engines since I was 5 years old. I can at least look at it." Before the man could protest further, she'd already dropped her backpack onto the dusty ground and was peering under the hood with surprising confidence. Her eyes scanned the engine with practiced efficiency, taking in every detail. "When did it start acting up?" she asked, her voice taking on a professional tone that seemed far too mature for someone her age. The man, whose name was Jonathan Pierce, sighed heavily. He was CEO of Pierce Industries, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the East Coast, and owner of more real estate than he could count. He wasn't used to taking advice from anyone, let alone a kid. But he also didn't have many options at the moment. "The engine started overheating about 30 minutes ago, then it just died completely. Won't even turn over now." "Did you notice any strange smells before it stopped? Like something sweet, maybe like maple syrup?" Jonathan blinked, genuinely surprised. "Actually, yes. How did you know that?" "Coolant leak," Zara said, pointing to a small puddle of bright green liquid beneath the car that Jonathan hadn't even noticed. "That sweet smell is antifreeze. When you lose coolant, the engine overheats and shuts down to protect itself from damage." As she spoke, Jonathan found himself studying the girl more carefully. There was something oddly familiar about her, something he couldn't quite place.
The way she tilted her head when she concentrated, the intelligent gleam in her dark eyes as they methodically examined each component, even the precise way she moved her hands reminded him of someone, though he couldn't figure out who. "What's your name?" he asked, suddenly. Zara Williams." She extended her hand, and Jonathan noticed it was already smudged with grease from her inspection. He shook it hesitantly, feeling the contrast between her small, work-roughened hand and his own manicured one. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Williams." "Nice to meet you too, Mr. Pierce. I think I can get you running again, at least temporarily." Zara opened her backpack and pulled out a small metal case, worn but well organized. "Grandpa Samuel always made me carry an emergency kit. He used to say you never know when someone might need help on the road." Jonathan watched in fascination as the girl worked with impressive skill and efficiency. She located the leak in the radiator hose, applied some specialized tape from her kit, and then used a plastic bottle of water from her backpack to refill the coolant reservoir. "This should hold until you reach town, but you need to get that hose replaced as soon as possible. Don't push the engine too hard, and keep an eye on the temperature gauge." It was when Zara reached up to push a stray braid away from her face that Jonathan's entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. There, hanging from a delicate silver chain around her neck, was a pendant he would recognize anywhere. A sapphire blue stone set in intricate white gold with a distinctive star-shaped inclusion that caught the sunlight. A pendant he had personally given to a little girl 11 years ago at an orphanage called Hope Haven, just days before that orphanage mysteriously burned to the ground. Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. His hands began to tremble. The world around him seemed to narrow to just that pendant swinging gently against the girl's chest as she worked. "That pendant," he began, his voice coming out rough and strained. "It's very unusual. Where did you get it?" Zara looked down on the necklace, her hand automatically reaching up to touch it. A shadow of sadness crossed her young face. "It was my mama's. My adoptive mama, Grace. She died 2 years ago in a fire at our old house." Her voice caught slightly on the words. "She always said this pendant was a symbol of an important promise. She told me never to take it off, no matter what." Jonathan's mind was racing. Grace. The name hit him like a physical blow. Grace Williams had been a nurse at Hope Haven Orphanage. The same Grace Williams who had vanished the night of the fire, taking a child with her, a child the authorities had said perished in the flames. "May I ask," he asked carefully, trying to keep his voice steady, where Grace got that pendant?" Zara shrugged, turning her attention back to checking the engine one final time. "She never told me exactly, just said it belonged to someone who made a promise they couldn't keep, and that someday I'd understand what it meant."
Could this really be her? Could this brilliant, kind child be the same little girl he'd promised to come back for all those years ago? The girl he'd been told was dead? Jonathan's throat felt tight. "Zara, let me drive you home. It's the least I can do after you saved me from being stranded out here." Zara hesitated, clearly remembering her grandmother's warnings about strangers, but something about Mr. Pierce seemed different now. The condescension was gone, replaced with something that looked almost like concern, maybe even fear. "Okay," she agreed slowly, "but my grandmother's house is just about 10 minutes up the road. You don't have to go out of your way." As Zara gathered her tools and climbed into the passenger seat of the Mustang, she had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to set off a chain of events that would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew about her life. And Jonathan Pierce, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, was already planning his next move. Because if this girl was who he thought she was, then everything he'd been told 11 years ago was a lie. And if that was true, then someone very powerful had gone to great lengths to make sure certain secrets stayed buried.
What neither of them realized was that their chance meeting on that dusty Georgia road had just started a countdown to an explosive revelation, one that involved a billion-dollar empire, a destroyed orphanage, and a young black girl whose extraordinary talent made her far more valuable than she could ever imagine. But who was watching them from the black sedan parked half a mile down the road? And why did they immediately pick up their phone to make a call that would change everything? Stay with me, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, greed, and the price of genius. Coming next, where Jonathan discovers the truth about Hope Haven, and someone from his past makes a threatening phone call that puts Zara in immediate danger.
Jonathan Pierce couldn't sleep. For 3 nights straight, he'd sat in his penthouse office overlooking downtown Atlanta, staring at enlarged photographs his private investigator had taken of the sapphire pendant. The same pendant he'd placed around a little girl's neck 11 years ago, promising he'd return for her. A promise he'd failed to keep. The ice in his whiskey glass had long since melted, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the documents spread across his mahogany desk, each one a piece of a puzzle that was becoming more disturbing the more he examined it. Financial records, property transfers, insurance claims, and at the center of it all, a single burned photograph of Hope Haven Orphanage taken the day after the fire that supposedly claimed 17 lives. "Mr. Pierce, you asked me to call when I found something," his investigator, Marcus Rodriguez, said through the speakerphone. His voice carried the weariness of someone who'd been digging through records for 72 hours straight. "And trust me, what I found, you're not gonna like it." Jonathan leaned forward. "Tell me everything." "Grace Williams died 2 years ago in a house fire in Oakwood, Georgia. But here's the thing. The fire inspector's report has inconsistencies. The fire started in the garage, supposedly from faulty wiring, but the electrical system had been inspected and certified just 3 months prior. And get this, someone paid cash for a rush cremation before any family could object." Jonathan's jaw clenched. Someone wanted to make sure there was no evidence. "That's not even the strangest part," Marcus continued. "Grace Williams didn't officially exist until 12 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history before she suddenly appeared in Oakwood with an adopted daughter. It's like she materialized out of thin air." "She changed her identity," Jonathan said quietly. "She was hiding." "From who, boss? Or should I say, from what?" Jonathan stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the glittering city below. Somewhere out there, in a modest house 2 hours south, was a 12-year-old girl who had no idea she was sitting on secrets that could topple empires. What about the adoption records? If Zara Williams was adopted from Hope Haven, there should be documentation. That's where it gets really interesting. There are no adoption records for Zara Williams. Officially, according to state records, she never existed at Hope Haven. In fact, according to the official survivor list from the fire, no children survived at all. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. They erased her completely. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure this girl stayed hidden," Marcus agreed. "Which brings me to the million-dollar question. Why? What makes this kid so special that someone would fake her death and hunt down the woman who saved her?" Jonathan closed his eyes, remembering that day 11 years ago when he'd first visited Hope Haven as part of his company's charity initiative. He'd been young, idealistic, newly appointed to the board of directors by his father, and he'd met a little girl with an extraordinary gift. A girl could look at any broken machine, any complex system, and simply understand how it worked. Not through study or training, but through pure, inexplicable intuition. "Her talent," Jonathan whispered. "She can fix things. She can look at broken machines and just know what's wrong with them. Like some kind of mechanical prodigy?
Beyond that, it's almost supernatural. When she was just 1.5 years old, she reportedly fixed a broken security camera at the orphanage by rearranging some wires. By age 3, she was helping the maintenance staff with electrical repairs. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Boss, that kind of ability, in the wrong hands, that could be worth billions. Military applications alone would be— Don't, Jonathan cut him off sharply. Don't even finish that sentence. Meanwhile, Zara sat in the small workshop behind her grandmother's house, surrounded by the comforting smell of motor oil and metal. This place was her sanctuary, her escape. The walls were lined with tools her grandfather had collected over a lifetime, each one perfectly organized, each one holding a memory. She was working on an old transistor radio she'd found at a yard sale, her nimble fingers carefully replacing corroded connections. The work calmed her, made sense in a way that school and people often didn't. Machines were honest, they broke for logical reasons, and they could be fixed.
Back in Oakwood, Zara was reading her mother's letter by flashlight in her bedroom, tears streaming down her face as she learned the truth about her past, about the orphanage fire that was no accident, about the men who'd hunted them for years, about the extraordinary gift that made her both special and endangered, and about the sapphire pendant around her neck, which wasn't just a piece of jewelry at all. It was a key to evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful companies in America. Outside her window, the black SUV sat in darkness, its occupants unaware that their every move was being photographed by Marcus Rodriguez from his position in a tree 2 houses down. And racing south on Interstate 75, 4 black sedans carrying Edmund Pierce's security team were closing in on Oakwood, prepared to acquire their target by any means necessary. The countdown had begun. Within hours, Zara Williams would be at the center of a storm that would make national headlines and force America to confront uncomfortable questions about how far the wealthy and powerful would go to maintain their empires. But first, she had to survive the night. What Zara didn't know as she clutched her mother's letter was that the pendant around her neck contained a microscopic data chip with 11 years of evidence, and that her mother had been gathering that evidence since the day she'd fled Hope Haven with a baby in her arms. And what Edmund Pierce didn't know was that his son was about to do the one thing he'd never expected: choose a 12-year-old girl's freedom over a $40 billion empire. The pieces were in motion, the storm was coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. Stay with me, because the next 24 hours are about to explode in ways that will shock you. Blood will be shed, secrets will be exposed, and a little girl with a gift for fixing broken things is about to break a system that's been corrupt for decades. Coming next, where the kidnapping attempt happens, Zara discovers what's hidden in her pendant, and Jonathan makes an impossible choice that will cost him everything. The clock on Zara's nightstand read 11:47 p.m. when she heard the first sound that didn't belong. A soft scraping against the window screen, barely audible over the hum of the box fan in the corner of her room. Most 12-year-olds might have dismissed it as a tree branch or a cat, but Zara had spent years living with a mother who jumped at every unexpected sound, who always parked facing the exit, who never used the same route twice. Grace had been preparing her daughter for this moment, even if Zara hadn't fully understood it until tonight. Her mother's letter lay on the bed beside her, the words still burning in her mind. If they find you, run. Don't trust anyone except Ruth and Samuel's old friend, Marcus. The pendant holds everything. Press the stone 3 times, then twist it counterclockwise. The truth is inside. Zara's fingers moved to the sapphire pendant, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She pressed the stone once, twice, 3 times, then twisted. With a nearly inaudible click, the back of the pendant popped open, revealing a tiny data chip no bigger than her pinky fingernail. Another sound, this time at the front door, the subtle click of someone picking a lock. Zara rolled off her bed silently, years of her mother's training kicking in automatically. She grabbed her backpack, already packed with essentials like Grace had taught her, always ready, always prepared. The pendant went into a zippered inner pocket. Her grandfather's toolkit followed. She moved to her bedroom window just as her grandmother's voice rang out from downstairs. "Who's there? I've got a shotgun and I know how to use it." "Mrs. Williams, we're with Pierce Industries Security. We just need to speak with your granddaughter. There's been a misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up." "At midnight, you can come back with the sheriff in the morning like decent folk." Zara heard the unmistakable sound of her grandmother pumping the shotgun. Ruth Williams might be 72, but she'd grown up in rural Georgia and knew her way around firearms. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. We have authorization to take the girl into protective custody. There are people who mean her harm, and we're here to keep her safe." Zara was already out the window, dropping silently into her grandmother's rose bushes below. The thorns scraped her arms, but she barely felt them. She could hear more footsteps around the house, surrounding it. They'd come prepared. She ran. The woods behind her grandmother's property were thick with Georgia pine and oak, the underbrush dense and difficult to navigate in the darkness. But Zara had played in these woods her entire life. She knew every trail, every hiding spot, every shortcut to town. Behind her, she heard shouting. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness like searchlights. They were coming after her. "Subject is mobile, heading into the woods behind the property. Teams 2 and 3 cut off the eastern perimeter. She's just a kid. She won't get far." They were wrong about that. Zara ran like her life depended on it because she now understood that it did. Her mother had died protecting her from these people. She wouldn't let that sacrifice be for nothing. 20 miles north, Jonathan Pierce was in his Mustang, pushing 90 miles an hour down the dark highway towards Oakwood. David Chen sat in the passenger's seat, coordinating with the FBI team that was supposed to meet them there. "FBI says they're 30 minutes out, but sir, your father's team is already on site. We're not going to make it in time." "Then we make our own time," Jonathan growled, pressing the accelerator harder. "Call the local sheriff. Get them out there now." "Already tried. The sheriff's office says they received a call from Pierce Industries' legal department an hour ago, claiming this is a corporate matter involving a kidnapped child and federal authorities are handling it. They've been told to stand down." "My father thought of everything." Jonathan slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "He's had 11 years to plan this. We've had 3 days." His phone rang. Marcus Rodriguez. "Boss, the girl ran. Your father's team is in pursuit. The grandmother fired a warning shot and they backed off from the house, but they're tracking the kid through the woods with thermal imaging. She's heading east towards the old highway." "I'm 10 minutes out. Can you get to her first?" "Already on it. I've got eyes on her position. Smart kid. She's staying in the creek bed where the thermal cameras can't track her as well, but she's running out of real estate fast. The woods end in about half a mile, and then it's open farmland." "Don't lose her, Marcus. That one girl is the only thing standing between my father and getting away with murder." In the woods, Zara splashed through the cold water of Miller's Creek, her shoes soaked, her lungs burning. She could hear the men behind her, their voices coordinating her position. They were getting closer. She emerged from the tree line into Old Man Henderson's soybean field, a vast expanse of open ground with nowhere to hide. The half-moon overhead provided just enough light to see by, which meant they could see her, too.
"I've asked. I was young and naive, and I trusted a man I shouldn't have trusted. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to keep that promise now, even though I'm 11 years too late." Zara studied his face for a long moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out the sapphire pendant. She twisted it open and removed the data chip. My mom spent 11 years gathering evidence against your father and his company. Every illegal experiment, every falsified document, every child that disappeared. It's all on this chip. She died making sure I could get it to someone who would use it to stop him. She held out the tiny chip. Can you be that person, Mr. Pierce? Can you destroy your own father to save kids like me? Jonathan took the chip with trembling hands, knowing that what he held was enough evidence to dismantle everything his family had built over 3 generations, enough to send his father to prison for the rest of his life, enough to bankrupt Pierce Industries and leave Jonathan himself with nothing. Yes, he said simply, I can. Thomas Brennan moved forward. Mr. Pierce, sir, I strongly advise you not to— You're fired, Brennan, Jonathan said coldly. You and everyone else who participated in tonight's attempted kidnapping. If you're lucky, you'll only face civil charges. If you're not, you'll be sharing a cell block with my father. The FBI agent, who'd introduced herself as Special Agent Rebecca Morrison, took the data chip. Mr. Pierce, this is evidence in a federal investigation. We'll need to take custody of it. Of course. But Agent Morrison, I want to make a full statement about Project Genesis, about Hope Haven, about everything my father's been doing for the past 20 years, and I want immunity for this young girl and her family. They've done nothing wrong except survive. We can arrange that. As dawn broke over the Georgia horizon, Zara sat in the back of Jonathan's Mustang, wrapped in a blanket provided by the paramedics who'd checked her for injuries. Her grandmother Ruth had arrived, having driven the old pickup truck at dangerous speeds to get there, and was holding her granddaughter like she might disappear if she let go. Baby girl, your mama would be so proud of how brave you were tonight.
Grandma, what happens now? Ruth looked at Jonathan, who was speaking with the FBI agents. I think, baby, it finally, after all these years of running and hiding, we get to live in the light. Your mama's sacrifice, it wasn't for nothing. Justice is coming. But in a penthouse office in Atlanta, Edmund Pierce was watching news alerts on his phone, his face expressionless as he read about the FBI raid on Pierce Industries headquarters, about federal agents seizing documents, about his son's betrayal. He made a single phone call. Initiate Protocol Omega, he said calmly. Destroy everything. Wipe the servers. Eliminate anyone who can testify against us. And find out everything you can about what was on that data chip. We need to know exactly what they have before we can formulate a response. He hung up and poured himself a drink, gazing out at the city he'd conquered through ruthlessness and vision. They thought they'd won. They thought one little girl and a chip full of data would be enough to bring him down. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Edmund Pierce hadn't built a $40 billion empire by playing by the rules. He'd bent them, broken them, and rewritten them to suit his purposes. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But what Edmund didn't know was that Grace Williams had been even smarter than he'd given her credit for. The chip Zara had handed over was just the insurance policy, a copy of the evidence. The real treasure trove was hidden somewhere else entirely, somewhere even Jonathan Pierce didn't know about yet. And it contained secrets that went far beyond Project Genesis and Hope Haven. Secrets that implicated not just Edmund Pierce, but senators, generals, judges, and corporate titans across the country. A conspiracy so vast and far-reaching that exposing it would shake the foundations of American power itself. Zara Williams, The 12-year-old girl who could fix broken machines was about to break open the biggest scandal in modern American history. But first, she'd have to survive long enough to testify, because Edmund Pierce was about to show everyone exactly how far a desperate man would go to protect his empire, and the bodies were about to start piling up. Stay with me, because what happens next will show you that the real monsters don't hide in the shadows. They sit in boardrooms, wear expensive suits, and believe that money and power place them above the law. But they're about to learn that some truths can't be buried, and some promises, even broken ones, can still be kept. The FBI safe house was a modest ranch home in a quiet suburb outside of Athens, Georgia. To anyone passing by, it looked like just another middle-class family residence, complete with a slightly overgrown lawn and a basketball hoop in the driveway. But the 4 armed agents positioned at strategic points around the property told a different story. Inside, Zara sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, as she worked with a team of FBI cyber forensic specialists to unlock the encrypted files on her mother's data chip. Special Agent Rebecca Morrison watched over her shoulder, amazed at how quickly the 12-year-old was navigating through complex security protocols that would stump most professional hackers. "How are you doing this?" one of the specialists, a man named Derek Chen, asked in awe. "These encryption algorithms are military-grade. It should take supercomputers weeks to crack them." Zara shrugged, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I can just see the patterns. It's like when you look at a broken machine, you can see what's out of place, what doesn't fit. Code is the same way. The encryption is just a puzzle, and every puzzle has a logic to it." "She's reading the code like it's a children's book," Derek muttered to his colleague. "I've never seen anything like it." "My mom taught me. She said that someday I might need to access this information, so she made sure I understood how her security worked. She used patterns based on things only I would know. My grandfather's birthday, the address of our first house, the model number of the first radio I ever fixed." Another layer of encryption fell away, revealing thousands of files, documents, photographs, audio recordings, video footage. Grace Williams had been meticulous in her documentation. Agent Morrison leaned in closer. "Can you open the file labeled Genesis Protocol?" Zara clicked it open. What appeared on the screen made everyone in the room go silent. It was a PowerPoint presentation, clearly created for high-level executives and military officials. The title slide read, "Project Genesis, Identifying and Developing Exceptional Human Capital for Strategic Applications." Zara scrolled through the slides, each one more disturbing than the last. Charts showing cognitive testing results on children as young as 18 months, photographs of kids performing extraordinary feats, a 4-year-old solving complex mathematical equations, a 6-year-old demonstrating perfect musical pitch and composition skills, a 3-year-old displaying eidetic memory by reciting entire books after hearing them once. In there, on slide 17, was a photograph of a baby girl with bright, curious eyes. The caption read, "Subject 17, Exceptional Mechanical and Systems Intuition, Recommended for Advanced Development Track." "That's me," Zara whispered. "I was just a baby." Agent Morrison's jaw was tight, with barely controlled anger. How many children were in this program? "According to this," Derek said, pulling up another file, "they identified 48 children across 6 different institutions over a 15-year period. Hope Haven was just one of several orphanages and children's homes that Edmund Pierce's network infiltrated." "What happened to the other children?" Zara asked quietly. The room fell silent. No one wanted to answer that question because the implications were too terrible to contemplate. Agent Morrison's phone buzzed. She stepped away to take the call,
her face growing increasingly grim. When she returned, she looked at Zara with an expression of deep concern. "That was the field office in Atlanta. Jonathan Pierce is missing." Zara felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean, missing?" "We don't know that for certain." "Yes, we do. Edmund Pierce has been eliminating anyone who could expose him for years. My mom figured it out. That's why she documented everything, because she knew people were disappearing." Zara pulled up another file, her hands shaking slightly. "Look, 17 names. Orphanage workers, social workers, even a state inspector. All dead within 3 years of Hope Haven closing. Car accidents, house fires, heart attacks, suicides. My mom tracked them all." Derek leaned in to examine the file. "These can't all be coincidences. The statistical probability alone." "They're not coincidences," said Agent Morrison grimly. "They're assassinations. Edmund Pierce has been running a cleanup operation over a decade." In a windowless room in the sub-basement of Pierce Industries headquarters, Jonathan Pierce was slowly regaining consciousness. His head throbbed where he'd been struck from behind, and his hands were zip-tied to the arms of a metal chair. The room was cold, sterile, and filled with air conditioning and computer servers. His father sat across from him, looking entirely too calm for a man whose empire was crumbling around him. "I am disappointed in you, Jonathan," Edmund said conversationally. "I gave you everything. The company, the wealth, the power. All I asked in return was loyalty."
She solved it in 15 seconds. The next puzzle appeared, then another, then another. Mathematical sequences, mechanical problems, logical paradoxes. Zara worked through them with the same intuitive speed that made her such an exceptional talent, never hesitating, always seeing the patterns that others missed. 23 puzzles later, the final encryption layer fell away. What appeared on the screen made everyone in the room draw in a sharp breath. It was a map, not a geographical map, but an organizational one. A web connecting Edmund Pierce to dozens of powerful people across the country. Senators who'd received campaign contributions in exchange for looking the other way. Military generals who'd awarded no-bid contracts to Pierce Industries for special projects. Judges who'd sealed court records and dismissed lawsuits. Corporate executives from other companies who'd partnered with Edmund in similar ventures. And at the center of the web, pulsing like a spider at the heart of its creation, was Edmund Pierce himself. "This is everyone," Agent Morrison breathed. "Everyone involved in Project Genesis and the programs that came after it. Names, dates, money transfers, communications. This is enough to bring down half of Washington." "There's more," Derek said, clicking on a subfolder. "GPS coordinates, dozens of them, all across the country." Zara clicked on the first set of coordinates. It brought up a satellite image of a facility in rural Montana, heavily fenced and guarded. "Subject Development Facility Alpha," she read from the attached notes. "Current population 17 children, ages 6 to 14. Specialties, mathematics, language acquisition, strategic thinking." They were still operating. Even now, with the FBI investigating, Edmund Pierce was still running his program of exploiting exceptional children. "There are 12 facilities," Derek reported, his voice shaking, "all hidden, all operating under front companies. If the documentation is accurate, there are over 200 children currently in these programs." Agent Morrison was already on her phone, calling her superiors. "We need to coordinate raids on all of these locations simultaneously. If Edmund Pierce gets wind that we know about them, he'll move the children or worse." "But first, we need to find Jonathan Pierce," Zara insisted. "If we raid the facilities, Edmund will know we have this information. He'll kill Mr. Pierce immediately." "She's right," Derek agreed. "We need to extract Jonathan Pierce before we move on the facilities." "But we don't know where he is," Agent Morrison pointed out. "Edmund could have him anywhere." Zara was still searching through the files, her brilliant mind working furiously. There had to be something, some clue her mother had left behind. Grace Williams had been preparing for this moment 11 years. She wouldn't have overlooked something as crucial as Edmund Pierce's emergency protocols. Then she found it. A file labeled simply Contingencies. Inside was a document detailing Edmund Pierce's response plans for various scenarios: media exposure, federal investigation, hostile takeover, and there, under family betrayal, was a specific protocol. He has a secure interrogation room in the sub-basement of Pierce Industries headquarters. It's not on any official blueprints. The entrance is hidden behind a false wall in the executive parking garage. My mom has the architectural plans, security codes, everything. Agent Morrison looked at the detailed diagrams Grace Williams somehow acquired. This woman was incredible. How did she get all this information? She worked at Pierce Industries before she worked at Hope Haven. She was a nurse in their occupational health department. She had access to all the buildings, all the secure areas. She started documenting everything the moment she realized what Edmund Pierce was really doing.
"Then let's go get Jonathan Pierce back," Agent Morrison said grimly, "and let's end this monster's reign once and for all." As the tactical team prepared for the extraction operation, Zara pulled up the last file in her mother's collection. It was a video, dated just 3 days before Grace Williams died in the house fire. With trembling hands, Zara pressed play. Her mother's face appeared on the screen, older than Zara remembered, tired and worn from years of running and hiding. But her eyes were fierce, determined, full of the love that had kept Zara safe for so long. "My beautiful girl," Grace said softly, "if you're watching this, then I'm gone, and the time has come for you to finish what I started. You have all the evidence now. You know the truth about who you are, where you came from, and why we had to hide for so long." Grace leaned closer to the camera. "I want you to know that every sacrifice was worth it. Every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every time we had to pack up and run, it was all worth it to keep you safe, to let you grow up as a normal child instead of a tool for evil men to exploit." Tears streamed down Zara's face as she listened to her mother's voice one last time. "You have a gift, Zara, an extraordinary gift, but you are not your gift. You are a beautiful, kind, brilliant young woman with a future full of possibilities. Don't let anyone reduce you to just your talent. You are so much more than that." Grace smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "When this is all over, when Edmund Pierce is stopped and the children are safe, I want you to live. Really live. Go to school, make friends, fall in love someday. Fix things because you want to, not because you have to. Be the person you were meant to be, free from fear, free from hiding." The video ended with Grace reaching toward the camera, her hand covering the lens as she whispered, "I love you, my girl, always and forever." Zara closed the laptop, wiping her eyes. Ruth wrapped her arms around her granddaughter, and they held each other while the FBI agents prepared for the operation that would either save Jonathan Pierce or get him killed. Outside, the tactical team was loading into vehicles. Agent Morrison approached Zara with a serious expression. "You're staying here, where it's safe. We'll bring Jonathan back." "I know," Zara said quietly. Then she held up a small device she'd built while the agents were planning. "But you'll need this. Edmund Pierce's security system has a biometric failsafe. If you try to breach it without the right authorization, it triggers a lockdown protocol that will trap Jonathan inside. This device will bypass the biometric scanner and fool the system into thinking you have clearance." Agent Morrison took the device, which Zara had apparently built from computer parts, a spare phone, and some components from the safe house's smoke detector. "You made this in the last hour?" "It wasn't that complicated, just signal spoofing and biometric mimicry, basic stuff." Derek Chen laughed in disbelief. "Basic stuff? She says it's basic stuff."
He looked at Agent Morrison. "This kid could probably hack the Pentagon if we gave her a laptop in an hour." "Let's hope we don't need to find out," Morrison replied. She knelt down to Zara's level. "Thank you for everything. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you." Just bring Mr. Pierce home safe. He kept his promise. He chose to do the right thing even when it cost him everything. He deserves to survive this. As the tactical team drove off into the night, Zara returned to the laptop and continued searching through her mother's files, because she knew something that the FBI agents didn't know yet, something she'd discovered in the documentation but hadn't shared. Edmund Pierce had insurance policies of his own, dead man switches, fail-safes. If he was arrested or killed, automatic protocols would trigger, files would be destroyed, money would be transferred, and most terrifyingly, elimination orders would be sent out for every witness, every person who could testify against him, including Jonathan Pierce, including Zara herself. They had one chance to do this right, one chance to take down Edmund Pierce and his entire network before he could activate his scorched earth protocols. And Zara Williams, the 12-year-old girl who could see patterns no one else could see, was about to figure out exactly how to do it. The end game was beginning. The pieces were in motion, and in the next few hours, the fate of hundreds of children and the future of one of America's most powerful families would be decided. But Edmund Pierce had made one critical miscalculation. He assumed that Zara Williams was just a talented child, a valuable asset to be acquired or eliminated. He had no idea that she was in fact the smartest person in the entire equation, and she was about to prove it in a way that would change everything. Stay with me, because what happens next will restore your faith that even in a world where monsters wear suits and wield power, courage and brilliance can still triumph. The battle is about to reach its climax, and not everyone is going to survive.
The sub-basement of Pierce Industries was exactly as Grace Williams' documents had described: cold, clinical, and designed to be completely isolated from the rest of the building. The FBI tactical team moved through the hidden access tunnel with practiced efficiency, their night vision goggles turning the darkness into shades of green. Agent Morrison led the team, Zara's improvised device clutched in her hand. Behind her, 8 heavily armed agents moved in formation, ready for anything. They'd reviewed the architectural plans a dozen times, memorized every corner, every possible ambush point. But nothing could have prepared them for what they found when they breached the interrogation room. Jonathan Pierce was still alive, still conscious, still tied to the chair. But Edmund Pierce stood behind him, a syringe in his hand, pressed against his son's neck. "Far enough," Edmund said calmly. "This syringe contains 2 mLs of Nuthynine neurotoxin, fast-acting, lethal, and completely untraceable once metabolized. One more step, and I inject it into Jonathan's carotid artery. He'll be dead in 90 seconds. Agent Morrison raised her hand, signaling her team to hold position. "Mr. Pierce, there's no way out of this. We have all the evidence. All of your facilities are being raided as we speak. Over 200 children are being rescued right now. It's over." Edmund's expression barely flickered, but Jonathan could feel the slight tremor in his father's hand, the first crack in the man's legendary composure. "You're bluffing," Edmund said. "You don't have the resources to coordinate simultaneous raids across 12 states. Want to bet your empire on that?" Morrison pulled out her phone, showing him the live feeds from multiple operations. Children being let out of facilities by FBI agents and social workers, documents being seized, administrators being arrested. It's happening right now. Your network is crumbling as we speak. For the first time, Jonathan saw something in his father's eyes that he'd never seen before. Fear. "How?" Edmund whispered.
The locations of those facilities are classified at the highest levels. There's no way you could have... Grace Williams documented everything, Jonathan said, his voice hoarse but defiant. She was smarter than you, better than you. She spent 11 years building a case that would destroy you completely, and she did it all while keeping a child safe from your reach. You lose, Father. Accept it. Edmund's hand tightened on the syringe. If I lose, then everyone loses. You think this ends with me? I have contingencies, fail-safes. If I don't enter a specific code by midnight, automated systems will begin eliminating every witness, every person who could testify against me, including that little girl you're so fond of protecting. Agent Morrison's blood ran cold. You're talking about murder on a massive scale.
I'm talking about insurance. I built this empire over 40 years. I'm not going to let it be destroyed by a dead nurse and a child prodigy. Edmund looked directly at the camera he knew was recording everything. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let me walk out of here, you're going to give me 12 hours head start, and in return, I'll provide the abort codes for my elimination protocols. Everyone lives, I disappear, and the world moves on. Except for the 200 children whose lives you've destroyed, Jonathan said quietly. Except for my mother and Grace Williams and all the other people you've murdered to keep your secrets, they don't get to move on. Casualties of progress, son. History will vindicate my vision, even if the present condemns my methods. History will remember you as a monster. Edmund laughed bitterly. History is written by the victors, and I haven't lost yet. Back at the safe house, Zara was watching the live feed from Agent Morrison's body camera, her mind working furiously. Edmund Pierce's failsafe was elegant in its ruthlessness. Without the abort codes, dozens of people would die, including herself and her grandmother. But if they let him go, he'd vanish into a network of protection he'd spent decades building, and justice would never be served. There had to be another way. There had to be a solution that her mother had anticipated. She dove back into Grace Williams' files, searching for anything related to failsafes or elimination protocols. Her mother had been thorough, obsessively so. She wouldn't have missed something this critical. And then Zara found it, a folder labeled a checkmate. Inside was a detailed analysis of Edmund Pierce's psychological profile, written in her mother's precise handwriting. Grace had studied the man for years, understood his patterns, his ego, his blind spots. He believes he's the smartest person in any room, Grace had written. His arrogance is his weakness. He can't conceive that someone might anticipate his moves, might be thinking 3 steps ahead. This is how we beat him. Zara read through her mother's strategy with growing understanding and horror. It was brilliant, but it was also incredibly dangerous. If it failed, people would die. If it succeeded, it would still require a sacrifice that made Zara's chest tighten with fear. But it was their only chance. She picked up the secure phone that connected her directly to Agent Morrison. I know how to stop him, but you have to trust me, and you have to do exactly what I say. At Pierce Industries, Agent Morrison listened to Zara's instructions through her earpiece. What the girl was proposing was insane, a gamble that went against every protocol and procedure. But as she looked at Edmund Pierce's cold, calculating eyes, she realized they didn't have better options. Mr. Pierce, sighed Longously, you win. We'll let you go. But first, you need to prove you actually have these fail-safes. Show us the system, prove it exists, and then we'll negotiate your exit. Edmund considered this, suspicion warring with ego. The desire to prove his superiority, to show them all how thoroughly he'd planned for every contingency, was almost overwhelming. Fine, he said finally, but I'm taking Jonathan with me. Insurance that you'll keep your word. He forced Jonathan to his feet, the syringe still pressed against his neck, and moved toward a computer terminal in the corner of the room. With his free hand, he entered a series of codes, and multiple screens came to life.
They showed a sophisticated automated system, pre-programmed messages waiting to be sent, contracts with assassins already queued up, bank accounts ready to transfer payment, names and addresses of targets, everything needed to eliminate every threat to Edmund Pierce's freedom. "There," said Edmund with grim satisfaction, "proof. Now I want a helicopter on the roof, fueled and ready to go. I want—" That's when Zara's plan went into motion. The screen suddenly changed. The system that Edmund had pulled up to demonstrate his power started running commands he hadn't authorized. Files began transferring, emails began sending, but not to assassins, to the media. Every major news organization in the country was suddenly receiving the complete contents of Edmund Pierce's failsafe system, including the names of every person he'd planned to have killed. "What did you do?" Edmund roared, his composure finally shattering completely. "This system is isolated, air-gapped, completely secure." Agent Morrison allowed herself a small smile. "It was secure until you connected it to your network to show us, and the moment you did that, a backdoor program activated, one that Grace Williams installed years ago when she worked here, hidden so deep in your system architecture that none of your security teams ever found it. She was waiting for you to do exactly what you just did, let your ego override your caution." Edmund stared at the screens in disbelief as his entire criminal enterprise was exposed to the world in real time. Names, dates, transactions, crimes, all of it flowing out to 1,000 different destinations, impossible to stop or recall. "Checkmate," Jonathan whispered. "Grace Williams checkmated you 11 years ago. We've just been waiting for you to make the final move." Edmund's hand trembled, the syringe still pressed against Jonathan's neck, but everyone in the room could see the man breaking, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "It's over, Father," Jonathan said softly. "You can kill me, but it won't change anything. You've lost. Everything you built, everything you did, it's all public now. You can't kill everyone. You can't buy your way out. You can't intimidate or manipulate your way through this. For the first time in your life, you're facing consequences you can't escape." For a long moment, Edmund Pierce stood frozen, his mind racing through options that didn't exist. The syringe in his hand represented his last piece of power, his final ability to cause harm. And then, slowly, his hand lowered. "I would have made her exceptional, Subject 17. She could have changed the world. My guidance, my resources, my vision, she could have been legendary." "She already is," Agent Morrison said, gesturing to her team to move in. "Just not in the way you imagined." As FBI agents swarmed Edmund Pierce, securing him in handcuffs, removing the syringe and reading him his rights, Jonathan Pierce finally allowed himself to breathe. His hands were shaking as agents cut the zip ties, and his legs almost gave out when he tried to stand. "Is she safe?" he asked Agent Morrison. "Zara, is she—"
She's fine. She's the one who figured out how to beat your father. That 12-year-old girl outthought a man who's been manipulating systems for 4 decades. Jonathan laughed, a slightly hysterical sound of relief and exhaustion. Of course she did. She's exactly who Grace always believed she could be. As Edmund Pierce was led away in handcuffs, passing dozens of federal agents and cameras that would broadcast his defeat to the world, he looked back at his son one final time. "You destroyed our family legacy for a stranger's child," Edmund said. "Was it worth it?" Jonathan met his father's gaze steadily. "She's not a stranger. She's a human being who deserved protection. And yes, Father, it was worth it. For the first time in my life, I did something that actually mattered." Edmund's expression twisted with contempt. "You're weak, just like your mother." "No," said Jonathan quietly. "I'm finally strong enough to be nothing like you." As the sun rose over Atlanta, the news was already exploding across every media platform. The fall of Edmund Pierce and Pierce Industries dominated every headline. every broadcast, every social media feed. The scope of Project Genesis and the subsequent cover-up shocked the nation. 200 children rescued from secret facilities, dozens of powerful people implicated in the conspiracy, a criminal empire dismantled overnight. At the safe house, Zara watched the news coverage with her grandmother beside her, Ruth's arm wrapped protectively around her granddaughter's shoulders. "Your mama did this," Ruth said softly. "She gave you the tools to finish what she started. She'd be so proud of you, baby girl." Zara touched the sapphire pendant around her neck. "She gave me more than tools, Grandma. She gave me the courage to use them, and she taught me that fixing broken things isn't just about machines. It's about fixing broken systems, broken justice, broken promises." Her phone rang. "Jonathan Pierce." "Are you okay?" they both asked simultaneously, then laughed. "I'm fine, thanks to you. That backdoor program your mother installed, it was genius. How did she even—" "She was a nurse, but she was also brilliant with computers. She taught herself programming and system architecture specifically so she could document what your father was doing. She spent years planning for this moment. She saved my life. She saved all of us." "Mr. Pierce, what happens now? To you, I mean. Your father's company, your inheritance, everything." I was quiet for a moment. "It's all gone. The board of directors has already filed to remove me from any leadership position. The company will likely be dissolved, its assets seized to compensate for the families of the children who were harmed. I'll probably face civil lawsuits for years, even though I've cooperated fully with the investigation." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm not." Jonathan's voice was firm. "I have enough money in personal accounts to live comfortably, and for the first time in my life, I can sleep at night knowing I'm not complicit in evil. That's worth more than any empire." "What will you do?" "I was hoping to talk to you about that, actually. The FBI estimates there are at least 30 more children from the original Project Genesis program who were never found. Kids who were placed in adoptive homes or foster care, who have no idea about their history or why they might be targeted. Someone needs to find them, make sure they're safe, help them understand their past." Zara understood immediately. "You want to find them?" "I want to make good on the promise I made 11 years ago, to protect those children. Better late than never, right?" "Right," Zara agreed, smiling for the first time in days. "And Mr. Pierce, when you find them, tell them they're not alone. Tell them there are people who will fight for them, who will protect them. Tell them that being special doesn't mean being a tool or a commodity. It means being human, just with extraordinary gifts." "I will. I promise." After they hung up, Zara returned to her mother's files one last time. She'd read through almost everything, but there was one last document she hadn't opened yet. A video file dated the day before Grace Williams died, simply labeled, "When it's—"
She's fine. She's the one who figured out how to beat your father. That 12-year-old girl outthought a man who's been manipulating systems for 4 decades. Jonathan laughed, a slightly hysterical sound of relief and exhaustion. Of course she did. She's exactly who Grace always believed she could be. As Edmund Pierce was led away in handcuffs, passing dozens of federal agents and cameras that would broadcast his defeat to the world, he looked back at his son one final time. "You destroyed our family legacy for a stranger's child," Edmund said. "Was it worth it?" Jonathan met his father's gaze steadily. "She's not a stranger. She's a human being who deserved protection. And yes, Father, it was worth it. For the first time in my life, I did—" And profit are more important than compassion and justice. Never become like the people we've been running from. Grace wiped her eyes and leaned forward, her hand reaching toward the camera, as if she could touch her daughter across time and space. "Live, Zara. Really live. Go to school, make friends who have no idea how special you are, and love you anyway. Find work that fulfills you, not because you have to fix things, but because you want to.
Fall in love someday with someone who sees all of you, not just your gift. And when people ask you about your past, about what happened, tell them the truth. Tell them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect someone who can't protect themselves. Tell them that justice might be slow, but it's worth fighting for. Tell them that one person's courage can change everything. Grace's smile turned soft, tender. I love you more than words can express. You were never just Subject 17 or Project Genesis or any of those dehumanizing labels. You were always my daughter, my joy, my hope for a better future. And now that future is here. Embrace it, live it, make it beautiful. The video ended with Grace blowing a kiss to the camera, her hand waving goodbye one last time. Zara closed the laptop, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release, of completion, of a burden finally lifted. She really did it, Zara whispered. She kept me safe long enough to finish this. She gave me everything I needed. Ruth hugged her granddaughter tight. She gave you life, baby. Twice. Once when she saved you from that burning orphanage, and again when she gave you the tools to save yourself and all those other children. That's a mother's love, pure and true. Outside, the sun was fully risen now, bathing the world in golden light. A new day, a new beginning. The nightmare that had defined Zara's entire existence was finally over. But, as she would soon discover, endings and beginnings were two sides of the same coin. Because while Edmund Pierce's empire had fallen, the ripples of his crimes were still spreading outward, touching lives in ways no one had anticipated. And Zara Williams, the girl who could fix broken things, was about to discover that the hardest repairs weren't mechanical at all. They were human, healing the trauma of the children who'd been exploited, rebuilding trust in systems that had failed them, creating a future where gifts were nurtured, not exploited. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, Zara wasn't facing it alone, afraid and running. She was facing it free, supported, and ready to make her mother's sacrifice mean something. Stay with me, because the final chapters of this story will show you what happens when justice is served, when promises are kept, and when one extraordinary girl decides that fixing broken systems is the greatest repair job of all. The battle is won, but the healing has just begun.
3 months after Edmund Pierce's arrest, the federal courthouse in Atlanta was surrounded by media trucks, protesters, and security personnel. The trial of the century was underway, and the world was watching. Inside courtroom 6B, Zara Williams sat in the witness box, her small frame almost swallowed by the large chair. She wore a simple blue dress that Ruth had bought for the occasion, and the sapphire pendant, now famous around the world, glinted at her throat. Across the room, Edmund Pierce sat at the defense table, flanked by a team of expensive lawyers who'd been working around the clock to minimize the damage. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his empire and his power, but his eyes, when they met Zara's, were still cold and calculating. The lead prosecutor, a formidable woman named Carmen Rodriguez, approached the witness stand with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Zara. Thank you for being here today. I know this is difficult." "Good morning, ma'am," Zara replied quietly, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. "Zara, I'd like to start by asking you about your earliest memories. What do you remember about Hope Haven Orphanage?" Zara took a deep breath. She'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, working with therapists and victim advocates to get ready to tell her story, but no amount of preparation could fully ease the weight of what she was about to recount. I don't remember much when I was really little, but I remember sounds, adults talking in serious voices, being in a room with bright lights and lots of equipment, someone, a woman I later knew was my Mama Grace, holding my hand and telling me it would be okay. Do you remember the tests you were given? Some of them, they'd show me broken machines and ask me to fix them, give me puzzles to solve, time me on how fast I could understand complex systems. At first, I thought it was fun, like a game, but as I got older, I started to notice that some of the other children who couldn't do the tasks as well would disappear. They tell us those kids were adopted, but what, Sarah? But I heard the adults talking sometimes. I heard them say that the children who weren't performing at optimal levels were being reallocated to less demanding placements. I didn't understand what that meant then. Now I know they were being sent away because they weren't valuable enough to Edmund Pierce. Carmen pulled up a photograph on the large screen. It showed a group of children at Hope Haven. Zara is a toddler among them. Can you identify anyone in this photograph? Zara studied the image, her eyes filling with tears. That's Tommy. He could do math in his head faster than a calculator. And that's Sarah. She could remember anything she read word for word. And that's Marcus. He could play any musical instrument after hearing a song just once. Do you know what happened to any of these children? Tommy is in a facility in Montana. We found him during the raids. Sarah, Zara's voice broke slightly. Sarah died in a house fire 6 years ago. The family that adopted her said it was an accident, but the fire investigation report that my mama found showed signs of arson. And Marcus, he committed suicide 3 years ago. At least, that's what the official report said. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of people shifting uncomfortably and a few muffled sobs from the gallery. Objection. Edmund Pierce's lead attorney stood up. The witness is speculating about events she has no direct knowledge of. These tragic deaths have no proven connection to my client. Your Honor, Carmen countered, the witness is providing context based on evidence that has been entered into the record. The FBI investigation has established patterns of suspicious deaths among former Project Genesis subjects. Overruled, Judge Patricia Chen said firmly. The witness may continue. Carmen turned back to Zara. Tell us about the night of the fire at Hope Haven. What do you remember? Zara closed her eyes, pulling up memories she'd spent years trying to forget. I was 3 years old. I woke up to smoke and alarms. Grace, my mama, she grabbed me and she was crying and saying we had to run, that bad people were coming. We went out through a back window. I remember looking back and seeing the building on fire, seeing smoke and flames from the windows where my friends were sleeping. Did Grace ever tell you why she took you that night? Yes, when I was older. She told me she'd discovered that Edmund Pierce was planning to sell me to a military contractor, that I was going to be taken away and used to develop weapons systems, that I'd never have a normal life. She said she couldn't let that happen to another child, not after what she'd already seen happen to others.
Carmen pulled up another document. This is an email that was recovered from Grace Williams' personal files. It's dated 3 days before the Hope Haven fire. Can you read the highlighted section? Zara read aloud. Subject 17 demonstrates unprecedented potential. Military applications alone justify immediate acquisition. Recommend removal from orphanage environment and transfer to secure development facility by end of week. Compensation discussed previously, approved. Edmund Pierce. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Chen gavelled for order. Zara, Carmen continued, in your mother's files, there were detailed records of 17 other children who were similarly acquired over a 15-year period. What happened to those children? We've found most of them. Some are in the facilities that were raided. Some were adopted by families who had no idea about their past. Some are dead. Some are so traumatized they barely function. All of them had their childhood stolen because Edmund Pierce saw them as commodities instead of human beings. Carmen walked closer to the witness stand. I know this is hard, but I need to ask you directly. Do you believe Edmund Pierce is responsible for your mother's death? Zara looked directly at Edmund Pierce. Yes, ma'am. My mama's brakes were inspected just 2 weeks before she died. The mechanic said they were in perfect condition, but the accident report said she died because of brake failure. And in the files my mama left me, she documented 4 other people who died in accidents involving brake failure right after they started asking questions about Hope Haven. That's not a coincidence. Objection. The defense attorney was on his feet. Speculation and hearsay. Your Honor, we have forensic evidence that supports the witness's statement, Carmen countered. The FBI's automotive forensics team examined the remains of Grace Williams' vehicle and found evidence of tampering that was missed in the original investigation. I'll allow it, Judge Chen ruled, but Ms. Rodriguez, please stick to established facts. The testimony continued for another 3 hours. Zara walked the jury through her mother's 11 years of documentation, explained the evidence on the data chip, described the night she was nearly kidnapped. By the time Carmen said no further questions, the jurors' faces showed a mixture of horror, sympathy, and righteous anger. Then came the cross-examination. Edmund Pierce's lead attorney, a slick man named Bradley Harrison, approached with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Williams, I'm sure this has been very traumatic for you, and I'm sorry for your losses, but I need to ask you some questions about your testimony. Yes, sir. You were 3 years old when you left Hope Haven, correct? Yes, sir. And most of your information about what happened there comes from your mother's files, not from your own memories. I have some memories, but yes, much of what I know comes from my mama's documentation. Documentation that you can't independently verify, correct? You're taking it on faith that what Grace Williams wrote was accurate and truthful. My mama never lied to me. I'm sure she didn't intend to, but people can be mistaken. They can misinterpret situations. Isn't it possible that Ms. Williams, perhaps suffering from paranoia or mental illness, misconstrued legitimate business operations as something sinister? Zara's eyes flashed. My mama wasn't crazy. She was a nurse who saw children being exploited and had the courage to document it. But you can't know that for certain, can you? You were a child. You are still a child. How can you be sure you're not simply repeating a narrative that your mother, with the best of intentions, may have gotten wrong? Before Zara could answer, Carmen was on her feet. Objection. The defense is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Chen said sharply. Mr. Harrison, ask your questions without the editorializing. Harrison changed tactics. Miss Williams, you have an extraordinary gift, don't you? This ability to understand complex mechanical and electrical systems. I'm good with machines, yes, sir. More than good, you're exceptional, prodigious even. Wouldn't you agree that someone with your talents deserves special education, special opportunities to develop those talents? Zara saw where this was going. I deserve to have a childhood and make my own choices about my future. Of course, but my client, Mr. Pierce, he built programs designed to help exceptional children like you reach their full potential. Isn't it possible that you're misconstruing those efforts as exploitation when they were actually meant to be beneficial? If he wanted to help us, he wouldn't have tried to kidnap me 3 months ago. He wouldn't have killed my mama. He wouldn't have sold children to military contractors like we were equipment instead of people. Harrison's smile tightened. Miss Williams, isn't it true that you stand to gain financially from my client's conviction, that there are pending civil suits that could award you and your family millions of dollars? The implication hung in the air that Zara was lying for money.
Zara's voice, when she spoke, was clear and strong.
My mama spent 11 years running and hiding to keep me safe. She died protecting me. The last thing I care about is money. I care about making sure what happened to me and the other children never happens again. I care about justice for my mama and for everyone Edmund Pierce hurt. That's why I'm here." The courtroom was silent. Harrison tried a few more angles, but Zara didn't waver. She answered every question with a combination of innocence and intelligence that made it impossible not to believe her. Finally, defeated, Harrison returned to his seat. "Redirect, Your Honor," Carmen said, standing. "Zara, one last question. If you could say anything to Edmund Pierce right now, what would it be?" Zara turned to face the man who'd haunted her entire existence. Edmund Pierce stared back, his expression unreadable. "I'd tell him that he was wrong," Zara said quietly. "He thought people like me were valuable because of what we could do, what we could build or solve or create for him. But that's not what makes us valuable. We're valuable because we're human beings, because we deserve love and safety and the chance to choose our own paths. He spent decades trying to own us, control us, use us, but he failed, because you can't own a person's soul, no matter how much power you have." She took a breath. "And I'd tell him that my mama forgave him. In her last letter to me, she said she hoped he'd find redemption someday, even though she knew he probably never would. She was better than him, kinder than him, and because of her, I'm free. We're all free, and that's something all his money and power could never take away." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. As Zara stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past Edmund Pierce. For just a moment, their eyes met, and in that moment, Zara saw something she never expected to see. A flicker of shame. It was gone almost instantly, replaced by the cold mask he'd worn for decades, but it had been there. Proof that somewhere, under all the calculation and ruthlessness, there was still a human being who understood, on some level, the magnitude of what he'd done. The trial lasted another 6 weeks. Dozens of witnesses testified. Hundreds of documents were entered into evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with their verdict, the courtroom held its collective breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Edmund Pierce, guilty on all counts." The charges were extensive: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, child exploitation, racketeering, fraud, obstruction of justice. Each count carried significant prison time. Together, they guaranteed that Edmund Pierce would spend the rest of his life behind bars. As he was led away in handcuffs, Edmund Pierce looked back one final time at the courtroom. His eyes found Jonathan, who sat in the gallery with tears streaming down his face. "I built an empire. I changed the world. No, Father, you exploited vulnerable children and called it progress. There's a difference." Edmund Pierce was taken to a maximum security federal prison. The man who'd once controlled billions would spend his remaining years in an 8x10 cell, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with corruption and cruelty. But as Zara would soon discover, punishing the guilty was only the first step. The real challenge was healing the wounded, rebuilding the broken, and creating a future where children like her could be extraordinary without being exploited. The trial was over. Justice had been served, but the story was far from finished. Stay with me, because what comes next will show you that the true measure of victory isn't in courtroom verdicts, but in the lives rebuilt, the futures reclaimed, and the hope restored. The hardest work is about to begin.
6 months after Edmund Pierce's conviction, Zara stood in front of a brand new building in downtown Atlanta. The structure was modern, welcoming, with large windows that let in natural light and green spaces designed to provide comfort and peace. Above the main entrance, a sign read, "The Grace Williams Center for Exceptional Youth." Ruth stood beside her granddaughter, one arm wrapped around Zara's shoulders. "Your mama would be so proud, baby. Look at what came from her sacrifice." Zara touched the sapphire pendant, now encased in a protective setting so she wouldn't lose it. This is what she wanted. Not revenge, not punishment, but this, a place where kids like me can be safe. Jonathan Pierce emerged from the building, carrying a clipboard and wearing jeans and a work shirt instead of his usual suit. He'd spent the last 6 months working with architects, educators, and child psychologists to design a center that would serve the children rescued from his father's facilities, as well as any other exceptional young people who needed support and guidance. "Ready for the grand opening?" he asked, with a tired but genuine smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Zara replied. Inside, the center was everything Grace Williams had dreamed of and more. There were workshops where children could explore their talents without pressure or exploitation, quiet rooms for therapy and healing, classrooms designed for individualized learning, recreation areas where kids could just be kids, and perhaps most importantly, there were counselors and staff members who understood trauma, who'd been trained to recognize signs of exploitation and abuse. The children began arriving within the hour. Some came with foster families who'd been caring for them since the raids. Some came from group homes. A few came alone, old enough to make their own decisions about their futures. They were a diverse group. Different ages, different backgrounds, different talents, but they all shared one thing in common. They'd all been identified as exceptional by Edmund Pierce's network, and they'd all suffered because of it. Tommy Chen, now 13, was one of the first to arrive. The mathematical prodigy who'd spent years in a Montana facility looked thin and haunted, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes when he saw Zara. "You're really her, Subject 17, the one who got away and came back to save everyone else." Zara hugged him. "I'm Zara, just Zara, and you're not Subject 42 anymore. You're Tommy. We don't use those numbers here. We don't treat people like projects." "But what if my math ability is all I'm good for? What if that's the only reason anyone wants me around?" "Then they don't deserve to be around you," Zara said firmly. "You're a human being with value that has nothing to do with how fast you can solve equations, and we're going to help you remember that." Throughout the day, similar reunions happened. Children who'd been separated years ago found each other again. Sarah's little sister, Emma, who'd been only 4 when Sarah died, learned that her sister had been murdered trying to expose the program. Marcus's twin brother, David, who'd survived when Marcus hadn't, finally found people who understood his grief and guilt. By evening, 37 children had gathered at the center. Some would live there full-time in the residential wing. Others would come for day programs. All of them would receive therapy, education, and most importantly, the freedom to choose their own paths. That night, Zara stood before the group in the center's common room. She'd been asked to say a few words to welcome them officially. Public speaking had never been her strength. Mechanical systems made more sense to her than human emotions, but this was important. "Hi everyone, I'm Zara. Some of you know my story. Some of you lived similar stories. All of us are here because someone decided we were valuable enough to exploit, but not human enough to deserve freedom and choice." She worked with the younger children, helping them understand their gifts without being defined by them. She taught them basic mechanical skills, not because they needed to be prodigies, but because understanding how things worked gave them confidence and independence. She shared her own struggles with being special and showed them that it was okay to be confused, scared, or overwhelmed. On her 13th birthday, the center, threw her a party. It was the first real birthday celebration Zara had ever had. Grace had always kept them small and quiet to avoid drawing attention, but now, in a room full of kids who understood what she'd been through, Zara could finally just be a teenager, celebrating with friends. As she blew out the candles on the cake Ruth had baked, surrounded by kids who'd become like siblings, Zara thought about her mother. Grace would have loved this. The noise, the laughter, the hope. This was what she died for. Not revenge or punishment, but this, children being children, exceptional talents being nurtured rather than exploited, futures full of possibilities rather than limitations. "Make a wish," Tommy urged. Zara closed her eyes, but she didn't wish for anything for herself. She wished for all the exceptional children still out there, still unidentified, still vulnerable. She wished they'd find their way to safety before someone like Edmund Pierce found them first. When she opened her eyes, she saw Jonathan watching from the doorway, his expression complex. She excused herself from the party and joined him. "You okay?" she asked. "I was just thinking about my father. He's in prison, spending 23 hours a day in a cell, and here you are, celebrating your birthday, surrounded by people who care about you. He lost everything, trying to own and control exceptional people. You've gained everything by simply being yourself and helping others. Do you ever visit him?" Zara shook her head. "He won't see me. He considers me a traitor. Maybe I am, but I'd rather be a traitor to his vision than complicit in his crimes." "You're not a traitor," Zara said firmly. "You're the person you were always supposed to be. Your father tried to make you like him, but you chose to be better. That takes more courage than just following the path laid out for you. Sometimes I wonder if I did enough fast enough. If I'd stood up to him sooner, maybe some of the people who died would still be alive. And if my mama had turned me over to your father, maybe she'd still be alive. But she made her choice, and you made yours. We can't undo the past. We can only build a better future." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children through the window, kids laughing, playing, being normal despite their extraordinary abilities. "Grace would be proud of you," Jonathan said softly. "She'd be proud of both of us," Zara corrected. "We kept the promise. We protected the children. We built something good from something terrible." As the party continued into the evening, Zara found herself thinking about the future. She was 13 now, entering high school soon. She had choices to make about her own education, her own path. The Grace Williams Center would continue with or without her constant presence. Other people could carry on the work. But Zara was beginning to realize that her gift, her ability to see patterns and fix broken systems, wasn't just about machines. It was about people, organizations, structures. She'd broken Edmund Pierce's corrupt empire. What else could she fix? Maybe social systems that failed vulnerable children? Maybe educational structures that stifled creativity? Maybe the very frameworks that allowed people like Edmund Pierce to exist and thrive in the first place. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in her life, Zara had the freedom, the support, and the resources to pursue whatever she chose. But that would come later. Tonight was for celebration, for remembering how far they'd all come, for honoring the sacrifices that made this moment possible. Tomorrow, they would continue building, continue healing, continue proving that exceptional people deserved exceptional care, not exceptional exploitation. The battle was won. The healing had begun. In the future, once dark with fear and uncertainty, now glowed with possibility and hope. Stay with me for the final chapter, where we'll see what becomes of Zara and her extraordinary friends, where Edmund Pierce's legacy finally crumbles completely, and where the true power of choosing compassion over profit is truly revealed. The story is almost complete, and the ending will show you that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms or headlines, but in the quiet moments when broken people finally learn to trust again.
She looked around the room at the faces watching her, some curious, some suspicious, some desperately hoping this place was real and safe. My mama spent 11 years protecting me from the people who wanted to use me. She sacrificed everything so I could have a chance at a normal life. And when she died, she left me the tools to finish what she started, to stop Edmund Pierce and save all of you. Zara took a deep breath. But stopping him was the easy part. The hard part is what comes next. Healing from what was done to us, learning to trust again, figuring out who we are beyond our talents and abilities, building lives that we actually want to live. This center exists to help us do that, not to fix us because we're not broken, not to exploit us because those days are over, but to support us while we figure out how to be both exceptional and normal at the same time, to help us understand that our gifts don't define us, they're just part of who we are. Tommy raised his hand. But what if people only care about us because of our talents? What if without our abilities, we're nothing special? Zara smiled sadly. I've thought about that a lot, and here's what I've figured out. People who only value you for what you can do for them aren't people who deserve a place in your life. Real love, real friendship, real family, those things aren't transactional. They're not about what you can provide or produce. They're about being valued just for existing. A girl named Melissa, who had perfect pitch and could sing in a dozen languages, spoke up. How do we know you're not just like them, gathering us all here for some new program? It was a fair question, one that Zara had anticipated. You don't know, not yet. Trust has to be earned, especially when it's been broken as badly as yours has been. So here's what I can tell you. This center is independently funded by the settlement money from Pierce Industries. Edmund Pierce's empire was dismantled, and the money is being used to help the people he hurt. No one person controls it. There's a board of directors made up of child advocates, therapists, and survivors like me. You can leave any time you want. You're not prisoners or subjects. You're guests, residents, students, whatever you want to call yourselves. If you don't like it here, if you find something better, you walk out that door and no one will stop you. And most importantly, you get to decide what you want to do with your talents. Want to pursue them professionally? Great. We'll help you find ethical opportunities. Want to do something completely different? Also great. Your gift doesn't have to be your career. Want to just be a kid for a while and figure it out later? That's great too. This is your life, your choice, your future. The room was quiet as the children processed this. It was a radical departure from everything they'd known, the idea that they had agency, that their talents were theirs to control. I know it's hard to believe. I know you've been lied to before, but I promise you, we're going to prove it through actions, not just words. Give us a chance. Give yourselves a chance. We've all earned the right to a better future. Over the following months, the Grace Williams Center became a model for how to ethically support exceptional children. The story spread through media coverage, academic papers, and word of mouth. Other organizations started reaching out, wanting to learn from their approach. Jonathan Pierce became the center's administrator, having found a purpose that his old life had never provided. He used his business skills to manage the organization efficiently, but now those skills were directed toward helping rather than exploiting. I can't undo what my father did. I can't bring back the people he killed or erase the trauma he caused, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to build something better. It's not redemption. I don't deserve that. It's just the right thing to do. Ruth Williams became the center's grandmother in residence, providing home-cooked meals, warm hugs, and the kind of unconditional love that many of the children had never experienced.
Her small house in Oakwood became a weekend retreat where kids could escape the city and experience rural life. Marcus Rodriguez, the investigator who helped save Zara, became the center's security consultant. But his job wasn't to keep the children in, it was to keep dangers out. He trained staff on recognizing predatory behavior, taught the children about personal safety, and maintained a network of contacts to ensure that anyone trying to exploit exceptional children would be immediately identified and stopped. And Zara? She became something she'd never expected to be: a mentor.
The morning sun cast long shadows across the campus of the Grace Williams Institute, which had expanded far beyond its original Atlanta location. 5 years after Edmund Pierce's conviction, the organization now operated 12 centers across the country, each one dedicated to supporting exceptional children in ethical, nurturing environments. Zara Williams, now 18 years old, stood at the podium in the Institute's main auditorium, preparing to give the commencement speech for the latest graduating class. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, and the sapphire pendant, her mother's pendant, still hung around her neck. The auditorium was filled with graduates, their families, staff members, and special guests. Among them sat Ruth, now 77 but still sharp and loving; Jonathan Pierce, whose hair had gone prematurely gray from the stress of the past few years; Marcus Rodriguez, who now ran security for all 12 centers; and dozens of children whose lives had been transformed by the Institute. But there was one presence that Zara felt most acutely, even though she couldn't see her: Grace Williams, whose vision and sacrifice had made all of this possible. "Good afternoon, everyone," Zara began, her voice steady and clear. "5 years ago, I stood in front of a much smaller group and talked about healing, about rebuilding, about learning to be both exceptional and normal. Today, I want to talk about what we've accomplished together and what still needs to be done." She looked out at the graduating class, 23 young people between the ages of 16 and 21, each one extraordinary in their own way. "When this institute first opened, we had 37 children who'd been rescued from Project Genesis facilities. They were traumatized, suspicious, and broken by years of exploitation. Many didn't believe that a place like this could really exist, that people could value them as human beings rather than assets. Today, we have over 400 young people across our 12 centers. And the beautiful thing is, most of them were never part of Project Genesis. They found us because word spread, because teachers, social workers, and families learned that there was a place where exceptional children could be supported without being exploited." Tommy Chen, now 18 and about to start at MIT on a full scholarship, stood to speak next. He'd become one of the Institute's success stories, having overcome severe anxiety and depression to rebuild his life. "I want to thank Zara and Jonathan and everyone here for showing me that I'm more than my mathematical ability. For years, I thought if I wasn't solving equations, I had no value. This place taught me that I could also love music, could enjoy cooking, could make friends who didn't care about my test scores. I'm going to MIT to study math because I want to, not because someone's forcing me or exploiting my talent. That's the difference." One by one, graduates shared their stories. Melissa, the girl with perfect pitch, who was now heading to Juilliard, but also volunteering at a children's hospital because she'd discovered she loved helping people as much as she loved singing. David, Marcus's twin brother, who'd become a therapist specializing in grief counseling because he wanted to help others navigate the kind of loss he'd experienced. Emma, Sarah's little sister, now 16, who'd channeled Sarah's eidetic memory gift into becoming a historian, determined to document the stories of Project Genesis survivors so they'd never be forgotten.
Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread. These young people had been given the space to discover who they were beyond their exceptional abilities. As the ceremony continued, Zara noticed a commotion at the back of the auditorium. Security guards were escorting someone. She caught Marcus's eye, and he gave her a subtle signal. Nothing to worry about, just an unauthorized person trying to enter. But later, after the ceremony, Marcus pulled Zara aside. "We had an incident during the commencement. A man tried to get in without credentials, said he was a talent scout for a tech company, wanted to recruit some of our graduates." Zara's expression hardened. "This is happening more often."
I know. Despite all the publicity about Project Genesis, despite Edmund Pierce rotting in prison, there are still people out there who see exceptional children as commodities. They're just more subtle about it now. "We need to do more than just run centers," Zara said, her mind already working through the problem like it was a broken machine that needed fixing. "We need to change the systems that allow this exploitation to happen in the first place." That evening, Zara met with Jonathan and the Institute's board of directors. She'd been thinking about this for months, planning her next move. "I'm not going to college next fall," she announced. The room went silent. Zara had been accepted to Stanford, MIT, and Harvard. Everyone had assumed she'd take one of those offers. "Instead, I want to start an advocacy organization, something that lobbies for legal protections for exceptional children, something that trains teachers and social workers to identify exploitation, something that works with law enforcement to recognize and prosecute people who try to do what Edmund Pierce did." Jonathan leaned forward. "Zara, you've already done so much. Don't you want to just be a teenager for a while? Go to college, make normal friends, have normal experiences?" "I've thought about that," Zara admitted, "and part of me wants exactly that. But every day we wait, more children are being identified and targeted by people who see them as resources rather than humans. I can't just walk away knowing that." Ruth spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "Baby girl, your mama didn't sacrifice everything so you could spend your whole life fighting other people's battles. She wanted you to have a life, a real life." "I know, Grandma, and I will have a life, but my life includes using my gifts, not just my mechanical abilities, but my ability to see patterns in systems and figure out how to fix them. This is what I'm good at. This is what I want to do." The board debated for hours. Some members worried about burnout, about Zara taking on too much responsibility too young. Others recognized her unique perspective as both a survivor and a symbol of the movement, gave her a voice that could actually create change. Finally, they reached a compromise. Zara would take online courses while building her advocacy organization. She'd have support from the Institute, but also the freedom to pursue her own vision. And she'd commit to regular therapy sessions to ensure she was processing her own trauma while helping others. "But there's something else," Zara said, pulling out a folder she'd been carrying. "Something I've been investigating on my own." She spread documents across the conference table. Edmund Pierce had partners, other companies, other wealthy individuals who participated in or benefited from Project Genesis. Most of them got away clean because the FBI's investigation focused on Edmund and Pierce Industries. Jonathan's face went pale. "Zara, if you go after these people, you're putting yourself in danger. They're powerful, connected, and they've already gotten away with it once." "Which is exactly why someone needs to expose them. They think they're safe. They think as long as Edmund takes the fall, they can continue operating in the shadows." Marcus examined the documents. "Where did you get this information?" "My mama's files. There were layers we didn't fully explore during the trial because we were focused on convicting Edmund, but she documented everything, including his partners and associates. Names, companies, transactions, it's all here."
The room fell silent as board members realized what Zara was proposing, reopening investigations that powerful people had worked hard to bury. "This could take years," one board member said. "It could consume your entire young adulthood. Or it could prevent the next Project Genesis from ever happening," Zara countered. "These people are still out there. They're still identifying exceptional children. They're just being more careful about it." Jonathan looked at the young woman Zara had become, so far from the scared 12-year-old he'd first met on that dusty Georgia road. She'd grown into someone formidable, someone who combined her mother's courage with her own unique brilliance. "If you're gonna do this," he said finally, "you won't do it alone. I'll help. I know how these people think, how they operate, and I still have contacts in that world who might be willing to talk." Marcus nodded. "I'm in too, but we do this smart. No cowboy moves, no unnecessary risks. We build cases carefully, legally, ironclad." Over the next year, Zara's advocacy organization, which she named Project Grace in honor of her mother, began its work. They partnered with investigative journalists, law enforcement agencies, and child protection organizations. Slowly, methodically, they began exposing the network of people who'd participated in or benefited from exploiting exceptional children. It wasn't easy. There were legal threats, intimidation attempts, and smear campaigns designed to discredit Zara and her organization. But for every obstacle they faced, more allies emerged. Parents of exceptional children who'd been approached by suspicious talent scouts, teachers who'd witnessed questionable recruiting practices, former employees of companies that had partnered with Edmund Pierce, finally ready to tell their stories. The breakthrough came when a senator who'd received campaign contributions from Pierce Industries in exchange for blocking child protection legislation was caught on tape discussing a new talent identification program with corporate executives. The recording, leaked to Project Grace by a whistleblower, sparked a federal investigation that made Project Genesis look small by comparison. 15 companies were implicated. 32 individuals were indicted, and most importantly, Congress finally passed the Exceptional Children Protection Act, legislation that created strict guidelines for identifying, supporting, and protecting children with extraordinary abilities. It wasn't a complete victory. Some of the accused were acquitted on technicalities, some fled the country, some cut deals that let them avoid serious prison time. But the network was disrupted. The practices were exposed, and the culture began to shift. On the 5th anniversary of Edmund Pierce's conviction, Zara visited him in prison for the first and only time. He looked old, diminished, nothing like the powerful titan who'd once controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire. Prison had not been kind to Edmund Pierce. He'd been beaten by other inmates who'd learned about his crimes against children. He developed health problems that the prison's limited medical care barely addressed. He'd lost the appeal that was supposed to overturn his conviction. They sat across from each other in the visitor's room, separated by bulletproof glass and phones. "Why are you here?" Edmund asked, his voice raspy and weak. "I wanted you to know what your legacy really is. Not the empire you built, not the money you made. Your real legacy is the Grace Williams Institute. It's the Exceptional Children Protection Act. It's 400 children living free, making their own choices, building their own futures. Your legacy is that you failed." Edmund's expression twisted with bitterness. "I gave those children opportunities they never would have had. I saw their potential when the rest of the world would have let it go to waste. You saw their utility. You saw what you could extract from them. That's not the same as seeing their humanity." "And what's the difference? Everyone uses each other. I was just more honest about it." Zara leaned forward. "The difference is choice. The difference is consent. The difference is seeing people as ends in themselves, not means to your ends. You never understood that. Even now, you still don't."
So you came here to gloat? To rub your victory in my face? No, Sarah said softly. I came to forgive you. Edmund looked stunned. What? My mama taught me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You took years of my life. You killed my mother. You destroyed hundreds of lives in pursuit of profit and power. But I'm not going to let you take my future too. I'm not going to let bitterness and hatred consume me the way greed consumed you. So I forgive you, not because you deserve it, not because you've earned it, but because I deserve peace, because the children at the Institute deserve to see that healing is possible, because moving forward is more important than looking back. Tears streamed down Edmund's weathered face. I don't want your forgiveness. I know, but I'm giving it anyway. Sarah stood to leave. You'll die in this prison, forgotten by everyone except as a cautionary tale, but the children you tried to exploit will live full, rich lives. They'll have families and careers and joy. They'll prove every single day that you were wrong about them, about all of us, and that's the justice that matters most. As she walked out of the prison, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She'd carried anger for so long, righteous and justified anger, but it had become a burden, one she was finally ready to release. Outside, Jonathan and Ruth were waiting in the car. How do you feel? Ruth asked. Free, Sarah said simply. Finally, completely free. That night at the Atlanta Center, Sarah gathered all the current residents for a special announcement. I've been accepted to Stanford. I'm going to study systems engineering and public policy, but I'll still be leading Project Grace, still fighting for protective legislation, still working to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. But I also want you to know that it's okay to move on. It's okay to build lives that aren't defined by trauma or activism. You don't owe the world your constant struggle. You've already survived enough. A 13-year-old girl named Maya raised her hand. But what if we want to help? What if we want to be part of the fight? Then we'll train you, support you, and stand beside you, promised Sarah. But only if it's truly your choice, and only when you're ready. There's no pressure, no expectation. Your life is yours to design however you want. As the meeting ended and the children dispersed to their evening activities, Jonathan pulled Sarah aside. Your mother would be incredibly proud. You've become everything she hoped you'd be. We did it together. You, me, Marcus, Ruth, all the staff and supporters. My mama started it, but we all finished it. What's next, after Stanford, I mean? Sarah smiled. I don't know. Maybe politics. Maybe I'll run for Congress someday, push for more protective legislation from the inside. Maybe I'll start a tech company that ethically develops tools for exceptional learners. Maybe I'll become a mechanic like Grandpa Samuel and just fix cars for the rest of my life. The point is, I get to choose. That's what my mama died for. That's what we've been fighting for. Not to turn exceptional children into heroes or activists or anything else. Just to let them choose their own paths, whatever those paths might be. As the sun set over Atlanta, Sarah stood on the center's roof garden, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were more exceptional children, more families struggling to protect their gifted kids from exploitation. The fight wasn't over. It might never be fully over. But for Night, Sarah allowed herself to simply be 18 years old. To think about college and future possibilities, to remember her mother with love instead of grief, to feel grateful for the people who'd stood beside her through the darkest times. She pulled out her phone and recorded a video message, something she'd been doing periodically as a way to process her journey. Hey, future me, it's been 5 years since that night when everything changed. 5 years since Edmund Pierce tried to kidnap me and we exposed his empire.
5 years since justice was served. I'm heading to Stanford soon. I'm scared and excited and unsure about what comes next. But I'm also free. Really, truly free for the first time in my life. I hope you remember this feeling, future Zara. I hope you remember that we survived, that we did something meaningful with our survival, that we helped build something beautiful from something terrible. And I hope you're still fighting for the right things, but also living for yourself, because Mama didn't save us just so we could sacrifice everything to save others. She saved us so we could live, really live. So that's what I'm going to do. Live fully, fight strategically, love openly, and never forget where I came from or who made this future possible. Zara ended the recording and looked down at the sapphire pendant one last time. It had been a symbol of so many things. A promise broken, a promise kept, evidence that changed everything, and now simply a reminder of a mother's enduring love. I did it, Mama. We're safe. We're healing. We're free. You can rest now.
And somewhere in the universe, perhaps, Grace Williams was finally resting, knowing that her sacrifice had not been in vain, that her daughter had not just survived, but thrived, and that the future she'd fought so hard to protect was now in capable, compassionate hands. The story that began with a broken car on a dusty road had transformed into something far greater, a movement, a legacy, a promise fulfilled. Not all stories have happy endings, but some have hopeful ones, and sometimes that's even better. This is the complete story of how one extraordinary girl, with the help of allies who chose conscience over comfort, brought down an empire built on exploitation and built something better in its place. It's a story about the power of courage, the importance of documentation, the possibility of redemption, and the enduring truth that every human being deserves to be valued for who they are, not what they can produce. Remember, exceptional ability should be nurtured, never exploited. Every child deserves safety, choice, and the freedom to become whoever they want to be. If this story moved you, share it, because the fight to protect vulnerable children is far from over, and awareness is the first step toward change.